Maybe. We're going to continue the lesson tonight on finding happiness and finding true happiness. And tonight we're going to look at the Beatitudes of Christ. Now, I'm going to start with this guy. I don't know if many of you have the pleasure of knowing our younger son, Levi, but he's a great kid. He's very genuine. He tells you exactly how he feels. He cares for people. He's one of those people that just is always trying to make people feel better, and he just has just a real emotional connection to people. Like his dad. No, not like his dad. Nor like his brother, for that matter. The rest of us are kind of the logical guys. But he also says some of the funniest things that you've ever heard. He says things that are random. Sometimes they're something you would find on a fortune cookie. Sometimes they're just they're super deep, and sometimes they're just funny. And so, what better way to start off tonight than to go through a few of what we call Leviisms? So here we go. This first one, and we write these down verbatim from what he says it. So, first one. Where are we going? We're going where it takes us. And I think that would be great on like a tie-dye shirt, right across the front, just carefree. That's a great line. You know what's a funny name for pants? Longs. When you think about it, if they're shorts, it kind of makes sense, right? That's just the way his mind works. Nobody suggested that. He's just thinking it out. I can't wait until we're home because home is the place we need to be. That's kind of the thing, you like a little motto you put on a wooden plaque that goes above your door. That's totally the kind of things. And he's very sentimental. I'm tired like a man in an old man's house. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't know exactly what that means, but at the same time, I think we've all been tired like a man in an old man's house every once in a while. Whatever that means, because you just get it, right? I'm not sure how we know, but that just makes sense somehow. All right. This is one of my personal favorites. If you give a bad guy a cookie, he'll write you an "I don't like you" card. Which, in my head, I envision there's like a bad guy Hallmark, where you can go and get like unsympathy cards or "don't get well soon" or other things, and apparently that's where they shop. So don't give bad guys cookies; they'll give you "I don't like you" cards. If you did something wrong, you know what I'd say? Rethink your mind. So sometimes he's just very, very direct. And then finally, and I swear there's a connection here, and he said this one time before we put him to bed one night, Dad, no matter what, there's only two things that I need in life, family and power. And because I'm the father of an apparent dictator in waiting, I'm really glad that I at least fall into the first category of family. I'm really sorry for the rest of you. I'm not sure. And maybe the whole brothers and sisters in Christ thing will connect, and you'll be family too. So those are funny. They're funny coming out of the mouth of a 6-year-old kid because it's just the way they perceive the world. But this last one I kind of got to thinking. This is kind of interesting, right? Because we think it's kind of silly. But really, a lot of the world kind of looks at this and says, yeah, power is really important, right? Things like power, success, comfort, popularity, these are all things that are highly valued by the world, right? These are things that are prized by the world. And that's not really surprising to us. It's surprising when maybe you hear a 6-year-old kid say it, but that's how the world thinks. All right, so we're going to get into the Beatitudes. And I use some of the materials that were provided. I use some different podcasts that are kind of on this topic, and so a lot of this, for better or worse, is not my own stuff, but it's other materials that I thought were just really interesting. So, looking at the Beatitudes as Jesus' revolution. So, we're not really sure exactly where the Sermon on the Mount was delivered, but we know it was somewhere in a mountainous area. If you look in Luke 6:12, in these days he went out to the mountains to pray. In Luke 6:17, and he came down with them and stood on a level place. And in Matthew 5:1, seeing the crowds, he went up to the mountain, or on the mountain. So you kind of get this visual that this is up in the mountains. And what's kind of interesting here is mountains are typically a place that's associated with the rebels, right? In any sort of culture or kingdom or country, where do the rebels hide out? They hide out in the mountains, right? That's the place where you can escape the authority. So it's kind of an interesting backdrop that you've got, Jesus here about to dispense the Beatitudes in sort of, which are going to turn all of the world's values on their ear, and he's doing it in a place where you would think the rebels are. So Jesus' revolution, and first off, it is a revolution, but it's not going to be like any other revolution that's come before or after it. Up until the point that Jesus delivers the Beatitudes, I guess when you look at every other revolution, we've kind of seen from some group trying to take control of another group. It's always some tweak on the existing powers of the group in power. It's always, some sort of adjustment to the current kingdom, but still the same things are valued, power and prestige and control, and even freedom. I mean, these are all things that the buzzwords for what that new administration is supposed to be bringing in. But Jesus comes with quite a different message, and he's going to turn that whole thing completely upside down. There's only two kinds of kingdom in this world, and I think this is really interesting to think about. Everything other than Jesus' message is a right-side-up kingdom. It's the values that the world would generally shake its head and agree. These are the things that are important. These are the things that will lead to success in life and the things that we want. Jesus is the upside-down kingdom. Jesus' kingdom is completely inverse of all those things and prizes the complete opposite, which is shocking. And we read it sometimes, and I think it's kind of, we read it so many times that we don't really appreciate how radical his message was. So, if you look at Luke 6, there's a good kind of breakdown here from what Jesus is saying that kind of shows us what these right-side-up kingdom values are. But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation rather, in my eye exam up here. Woe to you who are full now, for you shall be hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep. And woe to you when all people speak well of you, for so their fathers did to the false prophets. So what we basically have here from Jesus is a kind of a breakdown of these values that he's saying are not the appropriate values, the ones that we all prize as a world, but the ones that aren't ultimately what Jesus says are important. So let's break these down. What is you who are rich? What is rich really, right? Sure, it's money, but it's really power, right? The rich have power. They have influence. They have sway. They have the ability to get things that other people can't. They have the ability to persuade people that other people can't because they have power. You who are full now. Well, being full, that's comfort, right? That's basically I'm set. I'm in our modern context, it's having a nice house, having a nice car. We're healthy. We're good. We're even keel. We feel good. We have the things that the luxuries of the world, and we're just generally happy with what we've got. You who laugh now. So this one's kind of interesting, but this is really kind of success when you think about it. Laughing is, you're happy. You have accomplished something. You have, met the bar, and now you're able to kind of celebrate those victories that you have. You have done it. Okay? And then when all people speak well of you, that's popularity, right? That's, the guy, Elon Musk on Twitter with 50 million followers. People that just command attention, that people just flock to see. They're just popular. And in our age of social media, this one maybe is a bit more easy to calculate than in the past because of it's so easy to just look and see who's popular and who's not. So if those are the values that the world says are important, those are the things that Jesus is saying, these are the things that the world values, that I ultimately am going to show are not the values that you should be prizing. What then are the things that the world tends to shoot down, the things the world disdains or frowns upon? Weakness, sacrifice, discomfort, grief, and exclusion. Now, I don't know about you, but the truth is, it's pretty easy to get behind that, right? You look at all those things. I don't know anybody who wants any of those things, who desires any of those things. In fact, logically speaking, if this world is all there is, if this is it, then this makes total sense, that you would want all those things we just looked at, and you would want none of these things. I mean, logically, that tracks completely. If this world is all there is, if this life is all there is, you would be foolish not to want success and comfort and money and power and influence. But of course, this world is not all there is. And if there is a world that comes after this, if there is a life that comes after this, then all of these values, all of these things that the world prizes are foolish, right? It's silly to save up a bunch of money when you can't take it with you. So, the upside down kingdom, the kingdom that Jesus is ultimately going to bring and that he talks about. What makes us Christians is a reversal of these values. We prize certain values that the world disdains, the things we just talked about. Now, this is really interesting because this is one of the things, you always learn something when you study. It's one of the, it's always, anytime you do one of these classes, anytime Cleo Tarver finds me back there, and I know he's about to make me or ask me to do a class, and I try to hide, and he still finds me, as much as in that moment you're like, I got to prep for this. I have to admit, you always learn something new when you do it that you didn't really think about before. And so this is one of those things. So the values that we're going to look at in detail here in a little bit in the Beatitudes, it's not necessarily that we want these things, okay? It's not, and stick with me on this, it's not that we desire to have these things, but we see the value in having those things. I'm going to give you what I think is a good example of this. All right, so Jesus said, that blessed are the persecuted. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think of being persecuted is something that's going to make me happy. I challenge anybody here to think that being the actual event of being persecuted makes anybody happy in that moment. Rather, I think what we're learning is that the people that are persecuted are the people that, or let me phrase it this way, those people that are living as Christ calls them to live will be persecuted. You will experience that. And because you will experience that, you will be blessed because you're doing what Christ has called us to do in this world. So we're not looking to go out and find someone to persecute us. Kind of similar, we're not looking to go out and find someone to get into a conflict with or to resolve their conflict. Although, since I'm an attorney, that sounds like maybe business, so maybe I should do that. I don't know. That may be something I want to find. There's a quote that I found. Again, this is actually, I found a quote by one of the guys that it was in a podcast. I thought this was really good. So look at this. This guy named Stanley Hauerwas. Can't say I really know much about him. He's a theologian. But listen to this quote. Too often these characteristics, the Beatitudes are turned into ideas or ideals that we must strive to attain. As ideals, they can become formulas for power rather than descriptions of the kind of people characteristic of the new age brought by Christ. So it's not what you want to be, it's what you are. It's what you will go through, the things that you will suffer or the things that you will experience by being a follower of Christ. And you see the value in them. And I think that's interesting. I don't think that's typically the way, at least I've always thought about, blessed are the meek, or blessed are the peacemakers, peacemakers or peacekeepers. So, what about the world's values? Well, we don't really get hung up on them either way. And the thought here is that you're not distracted on not having money, on having money or power or fame. You're not focused on needing those things, but at the same time, you're not distracted on not having those things. It doesn't bother you either way. It doesn't really influence you either way. You don't have to have them. You don't have to not have them, and that's kind of weird. But think about it in this way: if you go to somebody's house and let's just say they've got a giant, beautiful house, and it's just gargantuan. There's easy to get into a sense of envying that person. You envy it, or you want that. That success that you know is just totally imbued in that big house. At the same time, if you yourself have a big house, or someone else has something, you shouldn't likewise feel that you're hung up on that. You shouldn't likewise feel that just because someone else has it, that distracts you. Because if you look at that and say, that shouldn't be, and you're just as distracted by thinking what someone ought to not have than what they do have, then it means it still controls you, right? If it doesn't matter to you, it doesn't matter to you. It doesn't matter if they're driving a Hyundai or a Lamborghini. What's it matter? And I think that's interesting. And I think there's obviously perhaps some limits to that idea. But the notion is we shouldn't let things of the world control us one way or the other. We should be able to make decisions without regard to the impact of the things that the world values. Okay, so our perspective in the upside-down kingdom. We're able to rejoice because great is the reward in God's kingdom. Regardless of our earthly circumstance, we know that we have standing with God. Our focus isn't on this world. We may not have wealth, but we're rich with God. We may not have power, but we're strong in God. We may not have recognition, but we're famous with God. We may be excluded, but we're welcomed by God. The whole focus is completely away from those things that the world wants us to look at. And in fact, and somewhat ironically, the values themselves may still be there at their core, but they're now shifted to God rather than with man. So being blessed in the upside-down kingdom. Now, I'll tell you that I kind of struggle with this because in some contexts, blessed is simply a kind of synonymous with happy, right? And in some contexts, it means something different. It's part of the fun of translating one language to another. Blessed doesn't always mean happy. And again, I'm going to go back to what I think is the most obvious example from the Beatitudes is blessed are those who are persecuted. I think that it's a little hard to comprehend that sentence as simply saying that you're happy in being persecuted. I think there's a deeper meaning to it, and I think there is happiness through what you suffer, but it's not directly the persecution that makes you happy. And I think that's fairly obvious. So it's more nuanced. The happiness, I would submit, is more of a byproduct of the blessing that we receive from whatever the value is that Jesus is espousing than the blessing itself. Okay? The happiness is a byproduct, not the blessing itself. Historically, what does it mean to be blessed? Now, the term's been used, of course, all in the Old Testament. And I picked a verse here out of Psalms 1:1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel. I think there's maybe an oven there. Maybe it's missing. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. Now, in that context, what this blessed means is this person's a model. This person is someone who imbues certain conduct, certain values, and they're blessed in what they reflect, what they show, which is a true value that the Bible is saying is important. It's very common in Jewish teachings to see this form of being blessed. Okay, now this again I'm gonna say is a guy I'd never heard of. I'm not gonna say I'm learned enough to have known about this guy before, but in some of the stuff I learned, I thought this was really interesting. So Jesus ben Sarah. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this guy. Obviously named Jesus, just like our Jesus. Notably, different dad. He was a Jewish scholar, lived about 150 to 180 years before our Jesus. And so what's important is, for context, this guy was very popular in his time. And so anybody in the first century would have been familiar with this guy. Any of his teachings or his writings would have probably been generally familiar to a first century Jewish audience. And so I think that provides some interesting context on what people would have been thinking at Jesus' time. So let's look at one of the things that he said. I can think of 9 whom I would call blessed, and a 10th who my tongue proclaims. Blessed is the man who delights in his children, and the one who lives to see the downfall of his enemies. Blessed is the one who lives with a sensible wife, and the one who does not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Blessed is the one who does not sin with the tongue, and the one who does not serve an inferior. Blessed is the one who finds a friend, and the one who speaks to an attentive audience. Now, let's just break these down a little bit. All right, lives, and you can see I bolded a few of these here. Lives to see the downfall of his enemies. Well, what is that? I mean, that's sort of a fairly adversarial form of success, right? And this is someone who's done it. They have risen above their enemies. Now, look at the next bold one. Who does not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Now, I'm going to admit to you, I really had no idea until I looked that up what that was really referring to. So here's what it means. And maybe some of you know this. So if you have a donkey and you've got an ox, and they both have the yoke on them, and they're both plowing, well, guess what? Those are unequal strength animals, and you are not going to plow evenly. You're going to presumably have a hard time going straight. And so this is unevenness in life, is what this is saying. This is someone who doesn't have balance, okay? And I think when you think about that, that's kind of someone who's generally comfortable. This is someone who's got everything going the right way, pulling straight ahead. Things are good. Things are PC. That's kind of this value. Look at the next one that's bolded. One who does not serve an inferior. This is someone who again has some level of power, right? This is someone who is successful. And then the last two, I think, one who finds a friend and one who speaks to an attentive audience. This is influence. This is someone who's popular. This is someone who is well known and well respected. Now, what we notice about all those things is it's still about worldly values, right? This is very soon in time before the time of Jesus. These are all still totally worldly values. And that's exactly what Jesus' audience, when he does the Sermon on the Mount, that's what they're expecting. This is the sort of thing they're expecting. And it sounds kind of, it's hard to get that context for us because to us this sounds so strange. But this is what was being taught. This is what was valued at the time that Jesus is delivering the Sermon on the Mount. So this is the expectation. Of course, these values, what we see here from other Jesus, Ben Sira, is totally opposite of what Jesus is going to promote. And in fact, he's going to affirm the broken, the poor, and the powerless. And that is a radical idea that nobody saw coming. There's 9 blessings in the Beatitudes. And as we go through these, it's important to kind of remember who our crowd is. So this is from Matthew 4:23 to 24. And he went throughout all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought him all the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, those having seizures, and paralytics, and he healed them. All right, so when you think about who Jesus' audience is, these are sick, hurting, powerless, unimportant people, right? And I think to the movie of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the little stop-motion animation video, the movie that comes on every Christmas. I'd say my kids know that, but my kids just watch YouTube, so they don't really know any movies. But if you ever think about the movie, that particular movie, when Rudolph is called out for the red nose, where does he go? He goes with the misfits, right? The outcasts. They don't have any, they're the undesirables that society does not want. And so I think, in a very simplistic sense, but when I think of Jesus' audience, they're the misfits. These people are the ones the world says, you are not important, you don't matter, we don't have any real care for you. And yet that's the people that Jesus is going to use as the anchor of this upside-down kingdom. All right, so let's go through the first of these. And I'm going to go out of order in some of these, and I did that because I think there's kind of a neat cadence to some of these values. Poor in spirit. So the verse says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." So, and we usually think of poor in spirit. Usually these people are economically poor, but that doesn't always mean it's the case. I mean, if you think of Matthew, for instance, Matthew's a tax collector. And one thing we know about tax collectors is they were typically fairly wealthy. And so poor in spirit doesn't always mean that you don't have money. But what it does mean is that you have nothing left to lose. Maybe presumably, you could be filthy rich and still be poor in spirit because you feel like you've got nothing. You are just totally deserted of value in yourself. And it's interesting because these are the people that feel like they themselves bring nothing to the table. They're the ones that are most open to Christ. Truly poor in spirit. Jesus owes me nothing, and I have nothing of value to offer him. All right, so this is another term I can't take credit for, but I thought this was neat. Not middle class in spirit. Middle class in spirit. I thought that was kind of a cool term. So middle class is, generally agree that, I don't bring anything to the table, but, and I'm saved through Christ. But at the same time, I'm here. I always come when the doors are open. I go work in the soup kitchen. I do good things. I help my neighbor. Kind of deserve it a little bit, It's kind of middle class in spirit, right? And it's funny because I think we all can get into this sometimes. We can all feel this way, that we're kind of deserving a little bit, right? I mean, we do the right things. We check the boxes. We're doing the right thing. It's not poor in spirit. And that's hard. I'd say that's hard for me personally, because we all sometimes feel like there should be just a little bit of a merit-based system, and there's not. Why are they blessed? Why are the poor in spirit blessed? They're blessed because they realize that Jesus has given everything, and it is therefore easier for me to give everything, right? Their life is not defined by the world's values. Instead, it's defined by God's values, and the reward is his kingdom. All right, those who thirst for righteousness. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Now, I'm going to say this is another one I think is a good example of how I think happiness as a pure emotional happiness may not be a good fit here. If you think about thirsting for anything, really thirsting, like you're just dying of thirst, that's typically not a condition you want to be in, right? If you're super hungry or super thirsty, that's not a desirable place to be. But these people hunger and thirst for righteousness in the world. They desire it so much. They just crave that it be here. That people be made right with each other, and that man as a whole be made right with God. And that is kind of actually, I think, an interesting way to look at what righteousness is. Right relationships. What is righteousness? It's that rightness between two parties. Doing right by the other party. Being faithful to the other party. Now, maybe that's person to person, or maybe that's person to God. But righteousness, and particularly in that latter category, is what these people crave. They desire it. They want to see that happen. These people are blessed for longing for those right relationships because they see this world, they see that it is broken, they see that it is not what it is supposed to be, and God is doing something about it. And because of that, they're blessed. Those who mourn. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So, the people that mourn are those that are so bothered by the evil in the world they see out their door, that they see on TV. I think I'm moving this. That it bothers them. It genuinely upsets them, right? They don't just simply turn a blind eye to it. It really, really bothers them what they see in the world around them. They don't just simply distract themselves with hobbies or by closing the blinds and walking away. It really matters. It really messes with their daily lives to see the evil in the world around them. And they're blessed because they know that eternal salvation is the true comfort of those who repent. They know that there is a way that it's brought right, and that's through Christ. All right, the meek. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now, the word meek, I got to be honest, I don't know if I ever used this word outside of talking about the Beatitudes. I don't know about you, but this is not a word that comes up in common parlance. I think, biblically, meek means gentle, quiet, submissive. I mean, things that are generally good qualities. But what does it mean to the world? The world says, someone who's meek is just in the way. They're unimportant. They're not of any value. They don't have anything important to say. They're not the influencers. And so the world sees the meek as something that's just a bother. Jesus' audience is the meek, right? Jesus' audience is unimportant to the world. These people don't bring anything to the world's standards, anyway, to the world's values. So, and this is where this gets kind of interesting, I think. And like I said, you'll see that I get a few of these out of order. When you take those that mourn, what we just looked at, and you pair that together with the meek, you've got in mourning people that are saddened by the evil that they see around them. But then you have in the meek, in the same people, in that same quality, people that realize they're not able to do much about it on a big scale. They're bothered by the evil, but they realize they can't do much about that. And these people are blessed because through their faith, they'll receive the inheritance as heirs. As heirs, right? As someone important. The merciful. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Mercy is care, compassion for someone who's hurting, right? That's fairly common. We understand generally what mercy means. So if someone is merciful, they're taking care of their neighbor. They're taking care of the people around them. They're paying attention to what their needs of their neighbor are. Maybe that's in a physical sense. Maybe that's in a spiritual sense. But they're caring for their neighbor. Now let's put these two together. So now we had the meek. Now we're going to build off that. So the meek, again, are people not able to do much on a big scale about the evil they see in the world around them in the morning, but they can show care and compassion on a small scale. They can show mercy. And that's what they're doing. These people are blessed since that same mercy that they show to their neighbor will ultimately be shown to them through Christ. Pure in heart. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So the pure in heart have focus, right? The pure in heart, they don't care about the world's opinions. They don't care about everyone else's opinion, what their coworker thinks. When their coworker pulls out their, when they pull out their lunch and they pray over their food, or when they've got a verse written over their desk, they don't care about what people think about them. Instead, they're only focused and purely focused on pleasing God. These people are the people who have this value. They're blessed because of that pure focus. They see God in spite of everything else around them, right? They can kind of cut through the static and keep God in focus. All right, the peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. All right, how are they peacemakers? These folks see, or they work to bring right relationship. Kind of goes back to the righteousness thing we saw. These people are working to bring right relationship to those people around them, and in so doing, they always find conflict, right? I think we've all experienced this. When you go out into the world to try to bring people to Christ, you're going to find people in conflict, and they work to reconcile that conflict. That's the idea, that they're trying to not only reconcile people, but of course reconcile conflict between people and God. And they're blessed because that reconciliation, of course, is also shown to them by God. Okay, so the last one is really two different Beatitudes, right? Or two different values, I guess, in the Beatitudes. And that is, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. And for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So the persecuted ties back into the peacemakers. These people, because they're out there trying to resolve conflict, right? Because they're trying to be the peacemakers, they're naturally going to be persecuted for it. And I think this one is very interesting because I think we all know that as Christians, anytime we're out there trying to talk to anyone else around us, and I think most people have probably experienced this, if you're talking to someone who's not a Christian, the moment they realize, and you're helping them, the moment they realize that you're a Christian, sometimes you can tell the attitude shift, right? Suddenly their head is full of all the stereotypes of a Christian. And it becomes really hard to make any progress because they see that, they think they know what you are and they think you're trying to sell them a bill of goods. And it's so unfortunate because this is one of those little ways that I think we as Christians are persecuted every day. Because people, again, this is not the kind of persecution of the first century. Maybe this is first world persecution, but you can see it in the way people react to us. They turn us out so often, and it's such a difficult thing to break through those stereotypes, to be able to get through and actually talk to someone and for them to see that you really do care about them. You're not just trying to just change their mind to what you believe because it's convenient for you. These people are blessed because they learn to endure by faith. The persecution that they suffer teaches them that they must continue to endure. All right, so of these Beatitudes, how are they ultimately embodied? Now, they should be embodied in all of us, right? We should have these values in the way we approach the world. But it's not just describing the values of the person who's being a Christ follower. It's also describing someone who comes from poor circumstances, right? Someone who came from poor circumstances. Someone who mourned over the state of the world. Someone who was extremely important but didn't think of himself as such. Someone who longed to see God's world set right. And someone who engaged in small acts of mercy to people around him to reflect the kingdom that was to come. And also someone who intervened in conflicts between people, in so doing, was persecuted up to the point of death for so intervening. And of course, I'm talking about Christ. And Christ is the ultimate blessing that we receive from enacting these values, the Beatitudes. He is committed to us providing the good news of salvation, right? And providing that to hurting and lost people. And that in itself, if anything of this can be really tied to happiness, I think that's it. Because ultimately all this leads to Christ. And what Christ did for us, that's how we connect the dots to happiness. So, have you found true happiness? Through the values of the Beatitudes, we ultimately get to Christ. We get to a model of Christ, and we get to understanding the blessing we have through Christ. And that's the happiness we're looking for. That's all I've got. So I appreciate your time tonight. And so let's close out with a quick word of prayer.